Hey, welcome to Uncomplication. I have a special treat for you today. I started a new podcast with my friend Graham. It's the ReFound podcast. Definitely subscribe to that channel here on YouTube, ReFound. You can also search for it on your favorite podcast platform. But I figured I would just play the full episode here on Uncomplication, hopefully to sort out more of our homies in the mix of the cryptoverse. So if you like this conversation, definitely subscribe to the other channel. But yeah, enjoy the fire at the Madhouse at the end of time. Cheers. We're just turning our personal friendship and conversations into content, essentially.
I'm here for it, man.
Yeah, let's start with you, man. You got some cool stuff going on.
Yeah, we were talking before. I've always been such a workaholic that the whole travel phase is very much a new thing for me. So yeah, I just got back from Mexico, a couple different places, which was beautiful and wonderful, and Mexico City and stuff like that. And then Africa's in what, like 8 days? Uganda and Rwanda, which I'm so excited about, and really excited with people I'm going to be meeting and visiting with and stuff like that. So yeah, just packing and getting ready for that.
Yeah. But more than that, I feel like you're on this growth edge. You're diving into different experiences, some more comfortable than others. And I actually look at you with a little bit of just a tinge of envy because I was
Yeah.
thinking to myself, man, when was the last time I just really let go in the way that you were just describing with your experience in Mexico? And I
Mhm.
feel like as a parent maybe, or just I'm a lot more domesticated than I was even 10 years ago when my kids were little. And I'm like, man, what would it take for me to let go in that same way and just like jump off into the deep end? It's actually scary. It's more scary now than it was as an untethered soul.
I totally get that. And if it makes you feel any better, the last 10 years I've basically done nothing but work. So yeah, this is uh uncomfortable for me in a lot of ways. I actually find parts of myself like missing the comfort of just like routine and consistency and where my income's coming from and all those kind of things like that. So yeah, I feel a bit untethered in a way. And every once in a while I have these little kind of, I don't know, like fear tinges from my mind of like, oh no, this can't keep going. Oh no, this something needs to we need to be more um things to be need to be more stable or something like that. So that's yeah, it's funny you mentioned that.
Yeah, I wrote an article way back in the day for Uncomplication, the blog, and I called it the Tower of This and That, and it had a little drawing that accompanied it. That was like a Jenga tower, and the concept was we go through life building these towers of concepts, and some of them are foundational. You know, someone's faith or childhood experiences or beliefs are these big pieces down at the bottom. And then up top, you know, you're kind of adding and removing, and it's a little bit easier to pull a piece from the top than the bottom, maybe. But there come these times, I know I've gone through several, where a big piece gets pulled out of the bottom for various reasons. Maybe it's intentional, maybe it was unintentional, an experience or a breakup or any number of things. And then this tower starts toppling, and it's this really interesting period where you can find new things to brace it with, new experiences, new people, new identities. Um, but then what seems to happen is a new tower is built and there's these new foundational pieces, and then you go and you go until that gets to be too uncomfortable or concrete. So I think when I was younger, man, I had like no tower at all. I was just like taking a bat to it every chance I got. And it was both terrifying and blissful in that there was very little attachment and like a lot of acceptance of things like death or transformational, the potential of transformation at any moment. And then I went through a period that we've talked about, you know, building a business and a family and had all these like new structures in place, and that got blown away. And now I'm in this new phase where my tower is like pretty concrete again. And it's really scary to think about like grabbing one of those big blocks and just pulling it out. So yeah, I'm curious if that sparks anything in your mind where you're at, what you're rebracing your tower with, and the
Yeah,
folly of it all.
yeah, man. Honestly, I was thinking about something while you were while you were talking, it actually reminded me of some earlier conversations we'd had about different, say tough periods and whatnot in your life. I've been kind of amazed at going from this, like 10-year hyper focused, tech work block to like, okay, finally, taking time away from all that, extended time away from all that. So I got this, free time. I've got some money saved up. I've got, um, that kind of thing. And yet, and at first, that was just like this blissful freedom of just so excited and all this, for I don't know, month or two. And then it's like all the stuff that I didn't have time to feel or process, not just from, whatever happened, the tough times during that 10-year block, but like before that and childhood stuff and, PTSD things and all kinds of things like that. All of a sudden there was this space and all this stuff started coming up. And man, the last year, year and a half, which has been absolutely wonderful, not, taking anything away from that, but it's also been, I've had some of the most tough, most difficult, most painful stuff. I have just physically felt more pain in the last year than I than I have in a very, very long time. And some things that I didn't even have the space to feel when I was a kid. And so it's like all that stuff's still stuck in there. And so anyway, it's kind of interesting. And I thought about something that you'd said um, during like one of the really, tough times in your life where you were basically like, I wasn't suicidal, but I didn't care if I lived or died or something like that. And I've thought about that during a couple different, like, just really tough, you know, personal things this past, year or two where I've had moments like that, and externally, oh, everything's great or whatever. But I've felt that a few different times. And ironically, I've just when I've kind of leaned into that, it's almost made it easier to do certain things that would have scared me before, like, big trips by myself in another country or whatever, and other things that are dangerous or, getting my pilot's license or what, you know what I mean? Stuff like that. um, I just thought it was interesting. I'm not really sure how to hold or process any of that, but I I just thought that was interesting because like whenever things are going, say, particularly well, um, I will feel that kind of retethering too of, oh no, this is too good. I don't want to take those risks. I don't want whatever. Versus whenever, I feel like parts of me are kind of fragmenting off, then it almost becomes easier to do the crazy thing because you're less attached to, you know, something that you're trying to protect.
Yeah, yeah. Um, it's really fascinating to me. I had so last night here in the studio we had a big dance party. I guess we're doing like two a year on the equinox is, and in the last one in the fall, I came in here and I made like 15 paintings, and I was just like all a swirl. This time around, there was a woman here that I knew from other things that we've done, and so I invited her to paint with me. And then people were coming in, and then they were wanting to paint, and so I just ended up kind of creating this community space for people to come in and like make art. And
Hmm.
it was pretty cool because I've done art integration therapy work and stuff like that. So I'm well practiced at encouraging people to express creatively, and it becomes almost a form of therapy. A lot of people have, by analogy for what we were just talking about, rigid concepts or safety nets of like, oh, I'm not an artist, oh, I can barely draw stick figures, et cetera, et cetera. You get them in a space like this, especially with DJs out there. The whole place is just like pulsating with music. Um, but it was interesting because I had a few people, and one in particular, that came in and just like hung out for a long time, and we were talking, and I was really just listening, letting them make their art and just listening. But the conversation was about how freaking hard it is to be an entrepreneur. And even beyond that, like how hard it is to just make a living these days and be able to pay for basic needs and live indoors while having any semblance of alignment with an inner passion or a purpose or service. And what that kind of dovetails with the conversation we're just having is I find it interesting that, at least in my experience, they're almost like poles, they're almost like pendulums. I used to think about it in terms of punctuation, where there's this run-on sentence of consistency, routine. If you have a job and that's how you're making your living, you're kind of in a rut, whether it's a good rut or a bad rut. You wake up and you're in the groove. And then there's these moments where, you go to Mexico and you do iboga, or you, I don't know, go out to the bars and get really drunk, or you go up in the hills and do a hike and smoke some pot or whatever. But there's these moments of inflection or deeper searching where, as you said, the feelings come up or the perspective comes up, and then that gets put on the shelf, and then dive back in, try to make the dream work. And it was just interesting to hear the language that that gal was using last night about, success and building wealth. I don't know, just like this whole paradigm. And what's really interesting to me, especially in the context of ReFound, is that, there's seasons and times and places for that self-discovery. And sometimes that happens not in the most ergonomic ways. Like we have a friend or a couple friends that are like going through a divorce and like their whole life unraveled, and they're like doing a lot of soul searching, but it's in the midst of this tumultuous period. The vector that I kind of want to hit maybe for the next little part of the conversation, because you are, I feel, very much on the like expansive growth path, is,
Tempting
you
to be.
know, yeah, right. I think it's interesting. Maybe this will just be my statement. We can kind of look at it from different angles or hit it like a piñata and see if candy comes out. But I find it interesting that the deepest wisdom teachings, as we know, kind of say like, you've already got it, you're already here, like this is it. There's so much um there's so much fullness in a moment when it can be observed, that this was my experience, at least when I was kind of younger and questing, is I had enough of these big experiences on the mountain that I was like, okay, I've got it. Like I'm gonna go back and just like be a person and do my part of the building or the digging or whatever. Um, but I feel like maybe culturally we've got this schism where we're either in chaos and knocking this tower over, or we're in like the clinging, the building, the goal orienting. um, I'm really trying to find like that sweet spot in the middle, or the ability to live. I mean, even in the way that this woman was talking last night, she's got such expectations because she has to, because there's rent to pay. She's invested in this business that she started, and I've been there too. And so you kind of, your hand is forced out of the presence into the frantic fixing. And so, yeah, I don't know. I feel like this is a fruitful topic for conversation, because I sense that a lot of our listeners are probably in one of two poles, but very rarely, you know, um, whatever that third-sided fence is. I used to joke about that with McCabe. There's this side and that side, but what's the side that like sees both? It can hold both. So yeah, I don't know. Any reflections on all of that?
Yeah, honestly, I think that's like a really relevant topic. It's funny you brought that up because I've been thinking about that a lot lately. Because there is kind of like the two extremes, and you and I both at different times have experienced like the depths of pain, depression, detachment of either not caring about your life, or I remember times as a kid of just outright, not just outright wanting to die, but thinking about how to make that happen, right? And And then the flip side of that, of, oh no, this part of my life's really good. I really love this person. I really love how things are going. I really love, these things I want to build in my life, whatever. And this like hyper attachment fixation. And so anyway, I've been feeling a lot of that. I feel like I've been just feeling versions of a swing. Again, nowhere near what, the kind of stuff I experienced as a kid, but and way more space to hold all that as an adult. But feeling like I do weirdly feel like there's some magic in the middle. And I've started, not that this is necessarily the most sustainable way to do it, but I've found that doing certain things that where my life is at least some point legitimately at risk, but in a safe way. I think like, I'm going flying tomorrow, right? And like every time that I go, at first when I started flying as an adult, I did a bit as a kid, so it wasn't like totally unfamiliar. But as an adult, there was just kind of that, oh no, one thing could happen and my whole life could be over. And at first there was like this kind of anxiety that would come up, and then over time, as I got kind of more comfortable with that, I actually started to feel a weird kind of freedom with that, to where every time I get in the plane, and I just kind of like let go, and I just kind of accept, okay, I'm taking my life in my own hands here. I'm competent, like I'm comfortable with the risks. I'm okay with the weather. I'm okay with the plane. I'm comfortable here. I'm comfortable, whatever it was. And I'd find that every time that I would do that, it was almost kind of like the quintessential, like, I don't know, masculine facing and triumphing over death, that kind of thing. You know, that a lot of people will experience in really extreme sports and stuff like that. Not that that's necessarily the healthiest way to go about that, because at a certain point, you can't take risks that are really not worth it. But I would feel that mechanism inside start to release, and then, go out, fly, have a great time. I'd forget about whatever my concerns were. I'd just be completely focused on what we're doing. And then, land would come back and I'd get out of the plane and I would just feel, 10 pounds lighter. And I just started thinking about, man, where else could I apply that? And I found that, at least so far, more intense things tend to get me there, like boxing, and stuff like that. Because if I'm not fully in that moment, I'm gonna get punched in the face and stuff like that. But I've that mechanism there. And then it's funny because then when things start to go well and your mind wants to extrapolate, oh, I don't want this to end or I want this to get better, then you watch it like reattach. Yeah, I do feel like there's this kind of letting go mechanism inside. There's also something that I thought about. I think I mentioned him before, but Chris Berninsky in the crypto space. I'm just a really big fan of his. He's just a really sober thinker, and he's a surfer and a bunch of stuff. But he wrote something a while back because he's had enormous financial success, and he basically wrote something about how at each level of success you had to consciously go through and re-let it go. Otherwise, that success becomes a prison for you, and it starts to trap you because you start clinging to it. At least my interpretation of that was him talking about the same thing. And so, yeah, I've been thinking a lot about, okay, how do I, in a healthy way, bring some version of that detachment, like find that mechanism, and to the point where you could wake up in the morning and you could do what I think the purpose of a lot of the Stoic meditations on death is to access that mechanism and kind of let it go without having to take any legitimate, without having to go do something that might actually be dangerous. But I think there's something really like beautiful and freeing in that, to be able to find that mechanism in whatever form that takes for you, and then be able to let that go, and then just um, go through your day
Hmm.
with less attachment to what happens.
Yeah, it's funny. I'm thinking about some of the people that I've worked with in the past, and um, that feeling, and even the chemistry that it produces in the brain and body. Uh, there's other ways to stimulate that, and one of them, I would say, is like substances, alcohol, nicotine, even just, I don't know, going out and partying really hard. Like I know there's like work cultures where people like work their asses off and then they just go, on these benders and then are hungover for a couple days and then go back, and it's just like a cycle. And I I don't know, I'm thinking about when I was a business monkey, and it was a very creative business, it was my business, but at the same time, I was trying to find ways to acclimate to just the extreme necessity of the amount I had to do, and that like builds up as energy in the body, and
Hmm.
then there's ways to release it, and some are more healthy than others, and in a way, letting go is like a little death. I mean, even talking about flying, like you're welcoming death. I'm thinking about, I love speed. I love like going on a motorcycle and going way too fucking fast for just a second, just to scare yourself enough to be like, whoa, okay. Like, you kind of lose that, that grasp. I think alcohol does that too,
Hmm.
that kind of looseness around your personality or your preferences. And maybe that's just the human dance. I suspect there are, I don't know, I suspect that there are ways to incorporate, I don't even know what I'm saying. I mean, that's the part that's so funny to me. Like, we've talked about this before on this same podcast, that in a large in large part people are a product of their environment. Like, I've just seen that, experienced that. And so at some point it's always like, what problem do I think I'm solving here? What am I trying to get at? I wake up every morning and I do these morning pages, and they always seem to be kind of like a whining, like venting of this like negative energy. Um but like, where is that coming from? And is that like natural? Is that just part of this culture that kind of has humans distorted into this capitalist machinery? Or is it what Siddhartha talked about, and it's just that base suffering of knowing that what you love you're going to lose, and what you don't have you want? And um yeah, because I think at the heart of ReFound, for me at least, is um this desire to just move on without attachment and to flow moment to moment. And that's a lot of what was happening, with the art making last night. I mean, here's just like this random example. So this was like a communal piece that I did with at least one other person. I think some other people got involved here too. But like, the thing about this kind of activity is just like the dance party, it's so ephemeral. Like, nobody's identity was staked on whether this was good or not. And it could just be created and thrown over the shoulder. And, we might like it or dislike it, but no one really owns it. And I feel like that is more conducive to living a creative human life than what we typically do in school. Like, that's part of where it starts, is like, all right, Billy and Sally, that's your paper, that's your paper. We're all going to do this thing, and we're going to compare each other over who did well and who didn't. And all of a sudden, the piece of art that you're making, the life that you're making, the business you're starting, the money you're making, the house that you live in is like deeply rooted to your sense of self. And I don't know, I'm beating a dead horse here, but it's like, what I want to figure out for myself and also to share, because I get these little glimpses of it, is how to live like this. you know, like how to approach every day with this level of communal trust and participation and attention, but without any attachment, so that when it's done, you're just on to the next sheet. And that tower of this and that, it's not, I'm using these art analogies because I'm in my studio right now and I see like these different pieces I've made. And it's like, at one point in time, I was creating that kind of art. And it's like, is that me? Is that my style? Is that who I am? Do I need to make more of that? I sold one of those. Do I make 10 more of those because people like them? Or do I say, you know what? That was a product of who I was then and there, throw it over the shoulder. And now I'm painting, in acrylics, and it's figurative and looks like this guy, like this, like totally different
I
types of
like that.
paintings. Right. Um,
I really like that.
and so with that woman who was in here last night, it's like, God, I know what it feels like to be like soul bound to a project or a business, and to have your whole livelihood on the line, whether it succeeds or fails. And what a miserable fucking place to put ourselves in. Um, I'm on a little rant here, but I'm just going to keep going until you stop me. I remember early on in community funded, I think we were like year 3, and we were joining all these like pitch competitions, like Techstars, and we were in the Blue Ocean Challenge, and they made us go through the E-Myth program. I don't know if you've heard of the E-Myth. It's I forget the name of the dude. He's some founder, and he wrote a book, and E is for entrepreneur, and it's the
Oh yes,
entrepreneurial
yeah,
myth.
I've heard of that. Yeah.
Yeah, and so it was this way of like kind of breaking down, like, you think you want to be an entrepreneur, but why? Like, what lifestyle do you really want to have? There's a lot of this kind of like self-reflection. And I remember at the time it was just like, "Pff, I got no time for that. Like I don't care. Like this thing is what I'm doing." And a lot of these people that turn around and write books like the E-Myth, or, there's tons of them. There's a whole marketplace of these books that help you succeed as an entrepreneur, but they're all kind of like uh reflective, they're not present, they're not active. They're from people that like did something and then they look back and said, "Wow, how did that happen? Oh, I'm going to like codify it and try and give it to somebody." And it never works that way. So, yeah, that's a lot of ranting. I'll kind of like weave it back together by saying that I feel like I see in so many people this reflection of my own desire to do something worthwhile, to have a life that I can wake up excitedly, to live and to do and to make money and to be in service and the process of actually doing the thing or getting there is this kind of messy art making where some days it's great, some days it's terrible, some days it's painful, some days it's less painful. Um, but the question is like, what lens am I looking at it through, and can it allow me to take all of these experiences with equanimity? The
Mhm.
highest drug trip, ascended deity mother, consciousness moments with the just, sitting on a park bench, staring at squirrels, or I don't know, getting a letter from the IRS or whatever else. Like, I don't have a clean way of wrapping it all up, but that's like the itch I'm scratching.
As funny as it is, like, I feel like what we and most every, what we just keep pointing back to is the state of presence and acceptance, because that kind of encompasses the not clinging to the past, not being attached to the future, not clinging to an outcome, not needing it to be a way. Um, and it's so funny. I feel like I'm sometimes so bad at being like at just being present and just accepting the moment. Like the moment is not enough. It's boring. It's this. I have to be doing something. I'm supposed to be doing something. I'm supposed to be something more. I'm supposed to be whatever it is. And the lengths that I've gone to at different times to just like get to or find that present moment, and whether through meditation or these different trips, or risking my life doing something or whatever it is, and then you get these little glimpses of it, and it's like what the Buddhists and the Zen teachers and everybody always says. It's like there's nothing to seek, there's nothing to find. That's your inherent nature. Get out of the way. And it's like it's so funny to me because I resonate so much with what you're saying, because that's exactly what I'm trying to do too. And okay, how do I find a way to, spend and invest my time in a way that's meaningful and contributes to something that I really care about and is fulfilling to me, and all these different kinds of external things. But also I feel like so much of that is chasing this internal state, which is wanting to just feel that peace and fulfillment and in flow. And there's a friend and teacher of mine who I love her to death, and one of the things she said a long time ago, let me see if I can remember it. And she does a lot of like, therapeutic work. And she basically said something along the lines of, if I wasn't doing this, I might be, a fisherman or fisherwoman in Alaska, working on a fishing boat and not doing, any of this work, helping anybody else. And I would feel like I was doing the same amount for the collective consciousness of humanity by being here and by doing my own internal work and by being, and I think about like a lot of this stuff from like the Maharishi, but they did a bunch of studies around when they would do, these really intensive, I don't know, 1,000 plus people meditating or whatever in a specific area, like crime rates would go down. And there's just all these really interesting things about, traffic accidents would go down and stuff like that in the city during the time period that they were doing the experiment. And so, yeah, I do think that it's really funny how all of us, and myself definitely included, will like externalize these things when that fulfillment whatever that fulfillment mechanism is, that just unlocking of that valve. I I mean, Eckhart Tolle was perfectly, content living on a bench for years after his, big awakening. You know what I mean? I feel like it's really, yeah, I don't really have a specific point that I'm angling for here, but I
Yeah.
just think that it's really interesting how a lot of these topics kind of overlap.
Well, I mean, what that also makes me think of, like, throw another curveball in there. I mean, we're talking about this kind of personalized questing to find this stability or a feeling or whatever it might be. And that is almost like assuming that we exist in a vacuum where we actually have control and we could find this alignment or not. And I don't know about Nashville, but here in Fort Collins, it was 88 degrees yesterday. It was 36 degrees above the average temperature for the year. There's places in the country that are, just day to day shattering all-time highs with no precipitation in sight. And I was going to bed last night because I was up late here doing this whole thing, and I was just like going to bed thinking like, man, like I'm so focused on this little patch of dirt that's mine. And when I do pick my head up, it's like, we got into this a little bit last time, but there's so much that we don't seem to have control over. And, I think that the comedy always comes when the person, finally cracks that code or gets that business running, does the thing that they've been working so hard to do, and then the whole script flips. COVID was that for a ton of
Hmm.
people. I mean, it was for our business. We were,
Yeah.
just kind of hitting our stride. All of a sudden, the world like shut down,
Yeah.
and so there's like this kind of relates to what you're saying with the people meditating and traffic rates or traffic accident rates going down is like I think at the heart of it in this whole like letting go, whether it's on a motorcycle or an airplane or a moment of stillness, is like being okay with the absurdity that um we're both at the wheel, we're in our cockpit at the wheel. We seemingly can make these decisions that have this big influence on us. And that, car is driving around on a aircraft carrier that could be pointing any which way, including, into a hurricane. And yeah, making peace with all of these different levels and still having the energy or the desire to get up and like do something in the morning. Cause it's I think the other approach to this is just like nihilism and you're like, well, nothing really matters. Nothing I do matters. And yeah, it's all just gonna be what it is. So yeah, it's such a funny thing being a human.
Yeah. I think about one of my, I don't know if you're, I think it was the Stanford commencement speech that Steve Jobs gave forever ago after his, cancer diagnosis and everything, where he basically talked about, um, he basically said something around the lines of, I'm the old now, you're the new, but soon you'll be old too. And that death was, as much as people, fight against it and struggle against it, that death was the greatest creation that life ever created. And that it allowed this space. It was this guaranteed mechanism to where nothing stayed stale and there was always something new that was growing, that was expanding. I just thought that was a really, really it was just a really interesting thing because I do feel like so much of our suffering is, I don't know, man, like the older I get, the more I like appreciate the Buddha and I appreciate Buddhism and I just appreciate the simplicity of, even like the Four Noble Truths. So life is suffering. It's suffering because you're suffering because you cling to stuff. You want it to be a way that it isn't. And the way you stop suffering is by you stop doing that. And it's just really, really, really simple. And that whole idea of like impermanence and that's really kind of the core of all of our suffering is that nothing ever stays in one place. I mean, you look at quantum physics, there's just nothing stays still, even things that we think are ancient or sedentary or not. And essentially, the core of our whole human suffering is some version of wanting things to be away or wanting things to stay away. And it's just kind of funny how like when you lay it out like that, it becomes so simple and so kind of absurd, but at the same time, so damn difficult to do even a little bit of that when your every mechanism in your mind is conditioned to be to need it to be a way in order for you to be safe or be okay, and it almost never goes the way that you want it to go. And so then that mind, the little suffering self inside, is just always upset about something. You're talking about that earlier, like the writing pages of it, just it's always upset about something. It's always suffering in there. I and one last thing I'll mention, another friend of mine, I remember her talking about, and she was talking about some like relationship dynamics and around dealing with like conflict in relationship, and really being able to step back, let go of your own triggers, your own stuff, that I need the other person to see me this way, I need the other person to understand whatever, and really be able to step back into just purely seeing and empathizing with the other person's perspective, which if it's an interpersonal situation, sometimes it's really, really difficult to do. Really, I find it very easy to do with people that I don't know, but I find it very difficult to do sometimes with people that I'm really close to, because there's all kinds of stuff. Well, you did this. Well, you did this, or whatever it was. And she was basically talking about what helped her with to really let that go inside. And basically, I think she called it like the small s self, like the little, the little always suffering person inside. It was basically like, what are you really letting go of when you let go of that? Like, are you really losing anything? You're letting go of a, you know what I mean, of a part that's
Why would
always
you want
upset
that?
about something. It's
Yeah.
always it's always upset about something. And basically how much more peace she had in her life since she just quit taking that so seriously inside. And like, oh, it's upset. And I see you and I love you, and giving compassion and love to it, but at the same time not getting pulled into it, of just knowing, it's like a kid. It's a, it's when things are great, it's happy, whatever it is. But whenever something's going wrong, it's upset and it's suffering about something. And it was just I don't know, I just thought it was a really, just kind of an interesting thread she went down.
Yeah. I mean, I think we've talked about this before, but it seems to me that the self, like what we experience as the self, is a form of resistance, and that to be completely without self, and you were talking about this a
Yeah.
little bit with your experience, just like this complete stillness, no ripples on the water, and when you glimpse that, it's like, oh, wow, okay, like this is all dream stuff. This, it really loses its, the specter, or the, the fear quality of it. Yet, when everything is perfectly still and tranquil, there's nothing happening. There's no resistance. There's no self-reflection, and it's almost like that agitation. Um, this book here, I think, taught me this in some cool ways. This is a great book. I recommend it for sure.
Oh, I love
Existential
that book.
Kink.
Yeah, I love
Yeah,
that
I
book.
mean, and she talks about how like having is evidence of wanting,
Mhm.
and these situations that we have in our life that feel really uncomfortable, or what that little self wants to complain about, in a way, this whole reality is something that we've manifested from whatever source, and having is evidence of wanting. We're actually creating these moments of resistance so that we can feel these big emotions, these big charges, because that's what we're here to do. And when you were just describing kind of that non-engagement in the interpersonal argument, or seeing through someone else's eyes the situation versus like having an opinion about it, I pictured like sitting in a room with a TV, and you have an option to like just sit in perfect meditation and perfect quiet and tranquility, or like turn on the TV and flip through the channels, and to just meditate entirely, like you would just die, nothing would happen, nothing would fill that space. Time would just collapse on itself, and you'd be old, and that would be it. And by the same token, if you're just there channel surfing and, flipping through shows and movies and whatever else, like you're you're huffing this stream of almost like synthetic resistance content, and there's nothing really productive about it or still about it. But, you know, the two poles are equally abhorrent, right? Like I wouldn't want to just I would not want to trade my attachment to my kids or my, all of the things that I look around that are like my product of doing or from some attachment, like you could go down to the root of it and be like, oh, like this should be different, or we can ease this fear, or this kind of Buddhist suffering. Um, but the alternative is almost worse. Like it's almost scarier. And that's where I tend to go through these cycles where I'll be very peaceful, very, meditative and kind of detached, but then it gets really boring in a way. And I just feel like, the world is happening and time just goes so fast in those states. And man, it's so funny. I've had so many conversations in my life, so many existential conversations, and they always like seem to be blossoming into something, and then they just come back around to where you started,
Yeah,
and
because
you
there's
just
nowhere to
never get
go.
anywhere.
Yeah, it's I think it's so funny, man. I was thinking as you were talking, and this has been I feel like I'm at the beginning stages of like really starting to integrate this, but it's been such a huge light bulb for me is learning what the ancients were talking about when they would talk about real like polarity and the ideas of what people would call like masculine and feminine energies, meaning like Shiva and Shakti, and we completely miss that in the modern world because we think about it in terms of gender, right? Like masculine energy is more male kind of things, and feminine energy, and that's not at all what they were talking about at all. And the masculine energy, the traditionally masculine energy, is the space. It's the consciousness. It's um that endless. It's the nothingness that holds everything. So it's unmoving. It's the stillness you can access in meditation or whatever. And then so that's the Shiva, and then Shakti, the feminine element is light, is everything that's is so it's the formless is the masculine element, and the form is the feminine element. And again, nothing to do with gender, zero to do with gender. And it's in fact confusing to even call it masculine and feminine, but the Shiva and Shakti element. And really starting to understand more of that in myself has like, because I had such ideas of what like enlightenment and spirituality, I mean, I still do, but like, especially earlier on, had such like ideas about that oh, spirituality or enlightenment is basically just like you go meditate by yourself and access you just access these deep states and everything like that, and you kind of have this picture of the Buddha, and that's really not it at all, and that's not even the way that most of these great masters actually lived anyway. You know what I mean? They'll go experience the the deepest of peace and oneness and everything, and then ironically they come back and they're the most involved in the world people ever. Like Buddha spent his entire life going around as a roving nomad, just teaching people. Jesus did that until they nailed him to a piece of wood. Like that's what those people do. And it's just and it's like, and they embrace not just like the consciousness, the formless, that that ultimate reality, but then they come back and they embrace the Shakti. They embrace the form that they are in, the energies that are coming through. They embrace their own emotions. They embrace the emotions of other people. They embrace just the life that is lifing around them. And anyway, I found that really, really helpful personally, also to differentiate different spiritual practices and things like that, of like, oh, is this more of like a Shiva practice? Is this more like a stillness practice? Or is this more of like a Shakti practice of really being with whatever's flowing through me in this moment? And art's a great example of that. Like whatever's flowing through, you're just feeling it and you're expressing it, right? Versus just kind of the stillness practices. So anyway, I feel like that's just a
Love
yeah,
that. I
yeah.
really like that framing. Yeah, it opens up a whole other can of worms. I feel like this current culture is such a just picture like not just one can of worms being open, but like cans of worms from all over the world with different languages on the label, just like all mixed together in this huge spaghetti pile. And we're expected to survive in it by playing the game, making money.
Hmm.
And yeah, it's interesting to me how these teachings are so basic, so prevalent, and so many teachers taught them, yet they're so hard to internalize in this environment, and they are skewed into these gender norms and images of, you know, heroic males and submissive females and whatever else. And yeah, I guess getting back to that sort of, you know, we're driving our little car, but we're on a aircraft carrier that who knows where it's going. I feel like I have this deep desire that I also am afraid of. Like, oh, don't think that, of like, all right, we've done this pattern of behavior. Like, I'm so ready for it to just fully go off the rails. I don't think I'm alone in this feeling. Like, just this kind of willingness and acceptance to really see things shift, even if it means chaos, to get back to a place where livelihood is living, is community, is caring, is dissolving yourself into a bigger field of concerns and people around you. This happens like instantly in a crisis. We see it all the time. Even, I don't know, as an example, like 9/11, and just the the movement into action of individuals for the well-being of the whole is something that is so painfully obstructed
Hmm.
in this I don't know, United States kind of global capitalist culture. And I feel like a lot of the people that you know, I look to as examples of people that are successful or like do things well, they're all these little silent solitary islands, you know. They build
Hmm.
their little thing and then they use it as an escape raft. But we're, I don't know. And this is again that whiny voice that's just like so dissatisfied that these ahas and possibilities are right at our fingertips. I actually think more people are having them than ever before, but the wider, you know, economic requirements just force a type of living that is counter to all of these things, and I just don't see that surviving. I mean, we're not going to survive. Again, 88 degrees yesterday. You know, the snowpack in Colorado is at the 0 percentile. So what happens when these communities run out of water? You know, like you see a very different change. And who knows what that looks like, but maybe that's where like the real human spirit shines rather than
I do feel like a lot of the kind of, I don't know, I want to say like kind of farm community, that kind of things, or kind of just like a land-based small ecosystem and stuff like that. The more we get into, the deeper into like the fourth turning and all these increasingly volatile political events and wars, and now Iran war and Ukraine's now getting involved with Iran, with the US against Iran. So we already have like these big battle lines drawing. And I do agree with you a lot of I feel like communities like that, and people that are just kind of learning to live in a more human centric way that's not so dependent, where everybody is producing something of value, but it's kind of more locally contained. Like I pretty much buy all my food at farmers markets now, and it it's really starts to make a lot of sense. You know what I mean? Like especially when you're talking about massive, potential supply chain disruptions and increasing economic pressures from the outside and things like that. Yeah, I do feel like a lot of those kind of really intentional communities might make a lot of sense in the coming
yeah,
years.
it's like we've been taught that that life is a mall, and you either open a shop and start selling people stuff or you go work at a shop and sell people stuff. But the mall is on fire. Like we see that the mall is on fire. And you know, across the whole gamut from institutions, um, corporations, all of the places that people put their energy and their livelihood, it's like I think it's becoming more and more apparent that the mall is on fire. and the questions become harder and harder. I mean, there's just the sheer survival of I need to put food on the table, so I'm going to do the thing. But that spark of creativity or believing that things can change is hard to do in a mall fire.
And it's also hard to do with AI just systematically wiping out jobs. I mean, that I feel like is one of the biggest wild cards here too, of literally this just human replacement. I saw the stats for new hires out of college, and they've basically been, I want to say it's either flat or declining, basically since the year that ChatGPT came out. So it's just, it's still just beginning to kind of show up in the broader economy and whatnot. But I really do wonder what society looks like when, you know, you have massive layoffs across. If anything that a computer can do, it does, better than you. And I just really wonder what that looks like at a massive scale, both for people's fulfillment and just kind of sense of contribution, as well as what that looks like economically. I mean, it feels very much like uncharted waters. I really struggle to see any parallels in history, any other technology that that has been created beforehand is much more of a human amplifier than just an outright human replacement, even with
Which is
factories and
eh,
things like that. You know what I mean?
yeah.
It's not the same.
And it's bizarre because the current tapestry of civilization in a sense requires like this marketplace. And AI being a replacement for these jobs for corporations whose business it is to sell things to consumers, whether it's insurance, whether it's healthcare, whether it's products, services, food, like everything, the actual profiteering of it comes from the sale of it. But if you replace all the humans, then you don't, like what are we actually replace? Then people can't afford it. Like it's there's a catch 22 here that I don't think is really understood even by the people on the top. Or maybe they really just, they want to reduce the population down to just a few of the wealthiest families, and they have AI to, I don't know, tell them bedtime stories, or I don't even fucking know. Like, what do you do at that point with that technology if you're not, um, we're using it to prop up a system, but that system was built by and for people, and machines don't need to make a living. They're not going to go out and buy things from Amazon ads or whatever else. Like,
Mhm.
yeah, it does feel like a what does it feel like? It feels very different from what I imagined, growing up watching Terminator and those types of, like this evil machine consciousness that realizes it's superior and wipes us out. It's actually this evil human consciousness that just
Yeah.
wants to like accelerate the capitalist game, but to its own detriment, like
Yeah.
cutting off the nose to spite the face.
I've been just reading a ton around the Iran war, mainly because my flights were going to be going through Doha, or at least that was not anymore. They're
Yeah.
not. So, but just, apart from the just normal horrors of war and the, you know, humanitarian situation and civilian casualties and all this stuff that, every time somebody starts dropping bombs, that's what happens. It's also just really both interesting and very scary to look at how AI and drones specifically, so, AIs with bodies are are just changing that face of war. And obviously Ukraine's been in this for years, but watching how, like Iran's one of Iran's biggest strategies is to build, cheap, low-cost drones that shoots at the US or shoots at allies. US can shoot them down, but it costs, $5 million Patriot missile for take out a $20,000 drone. They can just do that war of attrition, math-wise, and exhaust the US. Well, now the US is talking to Ukraine and getting these little mini cheap drone launcher things. It's like a little drone missile they can build for $1,000. And so it's just like turning into this weird math problem, shooting explosives at each other while you have all these just like really, just I don't know, it's just like a big financial problem. and then humans dying on each side. You know what I mean? And so it's just like, it almost feels like it's just making already sociopathic war seem even more so. You get what I mean? Like it's just amplifying all of this, and it's just turning the whole thing into a giant math problem. And it's really like pretty concerning, to be honest. Of like, this is that already, it's still very contained relative to the size of the world. Um, the whole kind of Terminator situations, you know, those kind of we've made movies for decades warning us about this, and we're almost like we're not only falling into those same traps, but like we're making it worse. Like we're worse than the machine that was.
Exactly.
We're worse than yeah. So
Our only hope is that AI
anyway,
gets smart enough, fast enough to save us from ourselves.
that would be nice. Yeah, let's get some adults back in the room, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, and so against that backdrop, like these questions become almost silly, you know, like you were talking about flying, like seeing flying toasters last week, and that might be the like sanest thing that's going on right now.
Yeah, yeah, man. It's gonna be yeah, I feel like it's gonna be one of those best of times, worst of times, um, periods in human history out of the next couple decades. It's just it's absolutely wild to watch the dispersion of, you know, both the most incredible advancements and all the things that AI can do, and gene sequencing and medical breakthroughs and making everyone's lives easier, and also just the absolute, you know, terrifying horror and efficiency in horrible ways that are coming from that. And then the whole job displacement economic situation, and us at, you know, 100% debt to GDP before we're even out the main crisis in 430. You know what I mean? It's yeah, man. It's I feel like local communities are probably a very wise thing for people to be set up with.
Okay, so with that as the background, tell me about Africa. What do you hope to see there? What do you hope to find for yourself and kind of globally?
Oh man. Yeah. This was something that kind of came together through, I don't know, a magical series of universe things, basically, where a friend of mine recommended, like, hey, you know, very spiritual friend of mine, like, hey, I think you should go to Africa. I think this would be really good for you. And I was at first like, what? What? This is not part of my plans or whatever. And then I kind of sat with it, and I something clicked inside of me of like, oh, I get what she's talking to. This could actually be really um this could be really good. And this could help kind of broaden a lot of the, you know, again, I've been so focused out of my own, you know, childhood trauma and this and stuff, and then, you know, tech stuff, and just kind of so focused. Again, it's like focused on, you said it earlier, like focused on my little spot of the pavement and protecting my spot from other people that are trying to take or hurt my spot, and try to protect the people that I care about that are really close to me. And it's just this really kind of, you know, that kind of um a survival frame, right? And that really doesn't, you know, doesn't really help anybody. Doesn't even really help me, because it just, you know, it keeps you in this really limited frame of living. And again, you add in all the, you know, spiritual consciousness elements. Once you start to experience those, it starts to feel kind of stupid to, you know, try to keep your, you don't really have an isolated consciousness, you know, it's connected to everything else. So anyway, kind of sat with that, and then that kind of clicked of like, oh, this could be, you know, really, really good. I see what she's talking about. Um, well, how would I even go about doing this? And then I just kind of put that out there, and I did a little bit of due diligence myself, but kind of put that out there of just kind of like a, you know, universe, if this is something that is meant to happen, you know, please show me, you know, show me something. And literally within like 2 days, it was through a friend and a random connection and everything like that. It just kind of all, and I got connected to an amazing nonprofit that works in out of Colorado, and they're focused on a lot of the same things that were really important to me. I've just growing up, I saw a lot of charities and things like that do a lot more damage than they did help. You know, charity can be a very corrupting thing. and just the whole ethos of the organization and everything that they do is just really, really focused on listening to local communities first and basically letting the local communities guide and then providing support and community connection through that. So anyway, I was just really, really impressed with the philosophy and the people that I talked to. And basically I had very kind of uh, simple ideas in terms of what I thought the trip would be. It was just kind of, I thought it'd be, me going to some rural place and volunteering and whatever I could help with, probably business stuff or, something like that. They basically put together this absolutely incredible agenda, like absolutely wild, all through Uganda and Rwanda. Oh, yeah. So there's a bunch of stuff, including a meeting with a lot of community organizations, some that are focused on education and healthcare and women's rights and a few other things like that. I really intentionally don't have like a specific agenda on my end. I really just want to kind of show up and basically be as open as I can and talk to people and say, hey, um, this is this is where I have some knowledge or aptitude or whatever. What do you need? How can I be helpful? And so that's most of the trip. And then there's just some also other amazing things that they were like, you're in Africa, you have to do X, Y, and Z things. So I'm going to do like a wildlife safari and stuff like that, and just really get um, up close with some just uh, um, amazing animals and whatnot in the wild and in some nature preserves. So yeah. So
Wow.
I'm excited about the whole thing. I really am kind of intentionally trying not to latch onto any outcome or anything that I, need to happen or want to happen. But I really do feel like I have a hard time imagining the trip not being like a very pivotal, life-changing, uh, trip at this point in my life. So
Yeah, I think
yeah, I'm looking forward to it.
your little patch of ground is about to expand.
I hope so. I hope so. I'm tired of living on my little patch. So
Right on. Well, feels like we spent some words.
yeah, man, traversed a wide variety of overlapping topics.
Yeah. It's a funny time to be alive. I don't know.
It's gonna get.
I guess it always is, but
Have you seen that clip of Terrence McKenna from, I don't know, 20, 30 years ago? It's such a great clip because it's so perfect. And he's basically like, things are gonna get increasingly weird until the point where we have to start talking about how weird it is. Like we're gonna have like AI and UFOs and aliens and all these kind of things like this.
we need to find that clip and we'll add it at the end here. Perfect.
So, all right, man. Appreciate you, dude.
A really common, ordinary way to describe the times that we're living in is that they're very, very chaotic, filled with acts of unspeakable evil, and at the same time, there's this sort of buzz and thrust of optimism, but it's definitely a dynamic where you've got extremes of good and evil in that way. Would you talk a little bit about the relationship between that dynamic as we go forward and the novelty continues to climax?
Well, novelty is not necessarily good or nice. Novelty is complex. That's what it is. And so I see really a concatenation of tendencies and forces here at the end. It's only going to get weirder. The level of contradiction is going to rise excruciatingly, even beyond the excruciating present levels of contradiction. I think it's just going to get weirder and weirder and weirder, and finally it's going to be so weird that people are going to have to talk about how weird it is. And at that point, novelty theory can come out of the woods, because eventually people are going to say, what the hell is going on? It's just too nuts. It's not enough to say it's nuts. You have to explain why it's so nuts. So between now and 2012, the next 14 years, I look for the invention of artificial life, the cloning of human beings, possible contact with extraterrestrials, possible human immortality, and at the same time, appalling acts of brutality, genocide, race baiting, homophobia, famine, starvation, because the systems which are in place to keep the world sane are utterly inadequate to the forces that have been unleashed. The collapse of the socialist world, the rise of the internet, these are changes so immense, nobody could imagine them ever happening. And now that they have happened, nobody even bothers to mention what a big deal it is. The fact that there is no such thing as the Soviet Union, people never talk about it anymore. But when I was a kid, the notion that that would ever change was beyond conceiving. So the good news is that as primates, we're incredibly adaptable to change. Put us in a desert, we survive. Put us in the jungle, we survive. Under Hitler, we survive. Under Nixon, we survive. We can put up with about anything, and it's a good thing because we're going to be tested to the limits. The breakdown of anything, and this is why the right wing is so alarmed, because what they see going on is the breakdown of all tradition, all order, all sanctioned norms of behavior. And they're quite right that it's happening, but they're quite wrong to conclude that it should be resisted or is somehow evil. The mushroom said to me once, it said, "This is what it's like when a species prepares to depart for the stars. You don't depart for the stars under calm and orderly conditions. It's a fire in a madhouse." And that's what we have, the fire in the madhouse at the end of time. This is what it's like when a species prepares to move on to the next dimension. The entire destiny of all life on the planet is tied up in this. We are not acting for ourselves or from ourselves. We happen to be the point species on a transformation that will affect every living organism on this planet at its conclusion.